Learning target 6, solving a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. Um, if a quadratic equation is written in this general form, where it's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then you can find the roots or the zeros. We've called them both in class. You can find the roots or zeros by using this formula. Okay, so the important part of this and why we even use the quadratic formula is when an equation is really, really hard to factor, then or impossible to factor, then we'll use the quadratic formula, and that'll work every single time, as long as, this is the key, as long as the equation is in general form. So as long as it's in this ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, always has to equal 0. As long as it's in that form, you can use the quadratic formula and you will find the roots or the zeros every single time, no matter what. So we're just going to look at a couple examples of using the quadratic formula. And I realize it's this big, long, complicated looking thing. It's really not that difficult, and we're not going to ask you to memorize it. So you can refer back to this as many times as you want. You don't have to have this thing memorized. So the key I said to remember is you have to have it in general form. So first we have to get this into general form and make it equal 0. So the very first thing I'm going to do is just add a 2 to both sides. So then we have negative 4x squared plus x plus 2 equals 0. Then if we look back at this general ax squared, we want to find what a is, what b is, and what c is. So in this equation, a is the coefficient on x squared, so a equals negative 4. B is the coefficient on just the x term, which is 1. And then c is whatever constant is added on to the end of the equation. So that's 2. Now that we know a, b, and c, all you have to do is just plug them into this quadratic formula right here, and that'll give you your roots. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. So all I'm going to do is go, here's b, I'm going to go negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to go b, which is 1, so b squared minus 4 times a, which is negative 4, times c, which is 2. And then that whole thing is going to be divided by 2a. 2 times a. So this whole big long equation right here will give us the x-intercepts or the zeros or the roots of this equation. So then all you have to do is just simplify it. So I'm going to go ahead and start simplifying. Negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared, which is 1, minus 4 times negative 4, which is negative 16, times 2, which is negative 32. So minus negative 32, which is plus positive 32. All that over 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. So then just continue to simplify. Negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 33 over negative 8. From this point, I should add in my x equals. X equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 33 over negative 8. This looks really long and confusing, and you're like, I have no idea what that number even is, if you try to think of it as a decimal. We're going to ask you on a test or something to write your answers in 2 different ways. This would be the exact answer. That's the first way that we want you to write your answer. The second, you can do a decimal approximation, so we want both. So the second answer would be if you just go through and find what that is as a decimal. So the first thing I'm going to do is square root of 33 as a decimal. That's about 5.74. So we're going to have x equals -1 plus or minus 5.74 over -8, which gives -1 plus 5.74, which is -4.74, or rather positive 4.74, divided by -8, which is about -0.59. All I'm doing here is just calculating the decimal. So I could also have -1 minus that, which would be -6.74 divided by -8, which gives me an answer of 0.84. So those would be the two approximate answers. And again, on a test I'll have you write both the exact answer and the decimal approximations. For this next one, first just go ahead and identify a, b, and c. A is the coefficient on the x squared term, which is 1. B is the coefficient on the x term, which is 2. And c is just your constant term, which is 7. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug those into the formula. X equals -b plus or minus, so -2 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. The square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And all of that is just going to be over 2a, which is just 2 times 1, which is just 2. So then I'm going to write my exact solution. -2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared, which is 4, minus 4 times 1 times 7 is 28, over 2. Okay, so that's going to be x equals plus or minus the square root of 2 plus or minus, sorry, the square root of -24 over 2. And if you want to, well, we'll just leave our answer at that. The last part then would just be to go through and figure out the approximate answers. So we would go through and just find decimal approximations for those answers. And those would be the two ways to represent the solutions. So before class, here's your example. It's already in the general form like we talked about, where it's ax squared bxc equals 0. So go ahead and identify a, b, and c, solve it, and then tell what these solutions tell us about the graph of the parabola.